Hey boys and girls, I'm back in the classroom. Feels weird to not have you guys here too. I just wanted to record a video of me reading our new story, Jake Drake Teacher's Pet. I'm going to try to record myself reading each chapter just in case you're not able to tune in to our daily chats. So here goes. Chapter 1 is called 4 Bad Days. I'm Jake Drake. I'm right in the middle of 4th grade. One thing I like about 4th grade is that I'm not in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, or 3rd grade anymore. And I'm not at Miss Lulu's dainty diaper daycare anymore either. I think 4th grade is my best year so far. It's so good that I have to think hard to remember anything about it that's bad at all. Like right now, I can only think of one day that wasn't so great. That was the day I thought my teacher, Mr. Thompson, was being unfair. It was because of the way he treated Sean Underwood that day. First of all, Mr. Thompson picked Sean to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Then, Mr. Thompson let Sean take the attendance sheet to the office. During math, Mr. Thompson asked Sean to write the answers on the chalkboard. After morning recess, Mr. Thompson let Sean pick out the new chapter book for class read-aloud time. And then, Mr. Thompson picked Sean to line up first for lunch. I know it sounds like I'm making too big a deal out of these things, but it was like Sean was Mr. Thompson's favorite. It was like Sean was the teacher's pet, and that's not fair. Turns out I was wrong about Sean, though. After lunch that day, Mr. Thompson said, "I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that at the end of the day, we're going to have a party with cake and ice cream. But the bad news is that it's a going-away party for Sean. Tomorrow, Sean is moving to another state, and we're all going to miss him a lot." Mr. Thompson was being extra nice to Sean because it was his last day. So Sean wasn't really the teacher's pet, and I was glad because I liked Sean, and being the teacher's pet is one of the worst things that can happen to a kid at school. You know what stinks about being a teacher's pet? Everything, that's what. I know this for sure because of what happened last May, right near the end of 3rd grade. It all happened in 4 days, less than a week. But to me, those 4 days felt like 4 years, because for those 4 days, I was in great danger. I was in danger of losing my friends. I was in danger of losing my reputation. I was in danger of losing my mind, because that was the time I became Jake Drake, teacher's pet. When I was in 3rd grade, we got 5 new computers in our classroom. Mrs. Snaven was my 3rd grade teacher, and she acted like computers were scary, especially the new ones. She always needed to look at the how-to book and the computer at the same time. Even then, she got mixed up a lot. Then she had to call Mrs. Reed, the librarian, to come and show her what to do. So it was a Monday morning in May, and Mrs. Snaven was sitting in front of the new computer at the back of the room. She was confused about a program we were supposed to use for a math project. My desk was near the computers, and I was watching her. Mrs. Snaven looked at the screen, and then she looked back at this book, and then back at the screen again. Then she shook her head and let out this big sigh. I could tell she was almost ready to call Mrs. Reed. I've always liked computers, and I know how to do stuff with them, like turn them on and open programs, play games and type, make drawings and build web pages, things like that. So I got up from my desk, pointed at the screen, and said, "Mrs. Snaven, if you double-click on that little thing right there, then the program will start running, and then you click on this, and that opens up the part about number lines." So Mrs. Snaven did what I told her to, and the program started running, because that's the way it works, and anybody knows that, except Mrs. Snaven. When the program started playing this stupid music, Mrs. Snaven smiled this huge smile at me and said, "Jake, you're wonderful." And she said it too loud. Way too loud. She said it so loud that every kid in the classroom stopped and turned to look at us, just in time to see Mrs. Snaven pat me on the top of my head like I was a nice little poodle or something, an embarrassed poodle with a bright red face. So I mumbled something like, "Oh, it was nothing," which was a mistake, because right away she said, "But you're wrong, Jake. I get so mixed up when I work with these new computers, and I think that all along I've had such a wonderful expert right here in my classroom, and I didn't even know it. From now on, you're going to be my special computer helper." I sat down fast before she could pat me on the head again. But the worst part hadn't happened yet. because Mrs. Snaven walked to the front of the room and said, "Class, if any of you has trouble with the computers during math time this afternoon, just ask Jake what to do. He's my special helper." By this time, my face was so red that I felt my ears start to get hot. I kept my eyes on my desk, but even so, I knew everyone in the room was looking at me, and I was just waiting for someone to start making fun of me, especially the kids who know tons more about computers than I do, like Ben or Shelby Orcutt. She's the biggest computer brain in our whole school. But just then, the first period bell rang, and it was time to go to art class, so I was saved by the bell. Miss Cott's room was a big mess that morning. That's probably why I've always liked the art room so much. It's the one place at school where you don't have to worry about neatness, or spilling stuff, or getting everything done in a hurry. The first thing we did in art class was put on our giant shirts. They're supposed to keep paint and glue and junk off our clothes. I put on an old blue shirt of my dad's. The other kids put on their giant shirts too, so we all looked like our legs had shrunk, which is another fun thing about art class. So on that Monday, I went to work at an easel near the windows. We were supposed to be making pictures for Mother's Day. I was about half done with my painting when I decided I needed a smaller brush, so I went to the big sink to get one. About 15 or 20 brushes were sticking out of a bucket full of brownish, greenish, yellowish water. I grabbed a handful of brushes and looked for one that was the right size. Then I felt someone come up right behind me. So I hurried and rinsed off all the brushes under the faucet, took the one I wanted, and stuck the rest on the rack above the sink. I looked behind me, and Miss Cott was standing there. She had this goofy look on her face, and her head was tilted to one side, and she was smiling at me. "Jake, that is the sweetest thing anybody has done in my room all week." Which didn't make sense, because it was only Monday morning, and there hadn't been much of a week yet, but I guess that didn't matter to Miss Cott. I gave this little lame smile and said, I need a smaller brush so I can finish." Miss Cott said, "And instead of working to finish your picture, you've stopped to help clean up the brushes. That is so sweet." By then, the whole class was watching us, and I was wishing that Miss Cott would stop saying sweet like that. But Miss Cott wasn't done. She turned to all the kids in the class and said, "If you all would be as sweet as Jake is and help clean up a little, then maybe this room wouldn't be such a mess all the time. Thank you so much, Jake." And as she said that, Miss Cott patted me on the head. I took my small brush and hurried back to my easel. I started working on my picture again, trying not to feel so embarrassed. Then I heard Ben whisper something to Mark. In addition to being great with computers, Ben Grumpson was probably the meanest kid in my 3rd grade class. He whispered extra loud so I'd be sure to hear him. "Hey, Mark, don't you think Jake is just about perfect? He's so sweet." I pretended not to hear, but I knew my face turned redder and redder. After art, we went back to our classroom for reading and social studies, and nothing much happened. Then, right before lunch, we had gym class. Mr. Collins was having one of his tough guy days. You can tell when Mr. Collins is having a tough guy day because on tough guy days, he calls all the boys and girls troops. After the bell rang, Mr. Collins blew his whistle and shouted, "Okay, troops, listen up. Get in a straight line here at the middle of the court. Come on, troops, look alive. Today we're going to play dodgeball." Half the class groaned, and the other half cheered. The kids who always got whomped by that fat red ball groaned, and the kids who are great at throwing and catching cheered. I was one of the kids who groaned. For me, dodgeball means trying to stay alive. Mr. Collins clapped his hands. "All right, troops, everyone whose last name starts with A through L, over to the far side of the court. M through Z, over here behind me. Let's hustle. Go, go, go." Mr. Collins started the game by rolling the ball along the black line down the middle of the gym. Glenn Purdy ran out and grabbed the ball for the other team. There's something weird about dodgeball. I don't know why it brings out the worst in some kids, but it does. Take Glenn Purdy, for example. In real life, Glenn is a pretty good kid. He's friendly, he's a good partner in math or reading, and he's good to have on your side in a basketball game because he's so tall. But when a game of dodgeball starts up, all of a sudden, this nice guy turns into a beast, and his arms are so long that when Glenn throws that fat red ball, it's like it was shot from a cannon. So Glenn had the ball, and right away our whole team backed up all the way against the wall. We knew that Glenn was going to whomp someone, And he did. Me, right on the shoulder. It took only about 4 minutes for the rest of my team to get knocked out, and then Mr. Collins clapped his hand and said, "Let's go, troops, another round, and this time it's a 2-ball game." And he rolled both balls along the black center line, which meant that now it was impossible for some kids to get whomped. It was possible for some kids to get whomped with 2 fat red balls at the same time, and that's what happened to me on the first throw. Again, I got 1 ball on the ankle and 1 ball in the stomach. Here's what the next 4 games of dodgeball were like for me that day. Whoomp, 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 whoomp. 6 games of dodgeball, and I was the first kid to get knocked out in every one of them. But did I ask if I could go to the nurse when the 3rd whoomp knocked me down and I skinned my knee? No. And did I ask if I could lie down on the mats when the 5th whoomp got me right on the head and made me see little rainbows all over the place? No. How come? Maybe because I was being stupid. But it's probably because I'm not that big, so even if I get hurt sometimes, I don't want anybody to think I'm a quitter. Anyway, I was so glad when that gym class was finally over that I was first in line at the door to be dismissed for lunch. Mr. Collins came over to the doorway. He gave a blast on his whistle to quiet everyone down. Then he said, "Listen up, troops. You all played great today. Good job. But the player of the day, maybe the player of the month award, goes to a special guy. Did everyone see who took the first hit in every game today? Did that person complain? No. Did he whine and groan? No. Why? Because he's a real trooper. That's why. Jake Drake here deserves my gym class Medal of Honor, and you can all take some lessons from him on how to be a good sport. All right, troops, dismissed." And of course, Mr. Collins was talking about me. What was he doing? He was patting me on the head. And as he was talking, I was looking at the other kids, and I could tell they didn't think I should be getting all this attention just because I stink at dodgeball. Standing there at the door of the gym with Mr. Collins patting me on the head, I got this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach because Monday was only half over, and I was already well on my way to becoming the most unpopular kid in the history of Dispress Elementary School. And that's chapter 1. We'll read chapter 2 tomorrow. Go ahead and read the instructions so that you know what we're going to do with Teacher's Pet and Jake Drake Know-It-All.